My father was a proofreader and sort of editorial assistant in a small publishing house. At night, he used to sit up till 2 or 3 in the morning, surrounded by shadows of his bookshelves, with his body immersed in darkness and only his gray head floating in a ring of light from his desk lamp, as though he was laboriously climbing the gully between the mountains of books piled up on his desk, filling slips and cards with notes in preparation for his great book on the history of Jews in Poland. He was principled, an intense man, who was deeply committed to the concept of justice. My mother, on the other hand, liked to raise her half-empty glass of tea and stare through it at the blue light in the window. Sometimes she would press it to her cheek as though drawing warmth from the contact. She was a teacher in an institution for immigrant orphans who had managed to hide from the Nazis in monasteries, remote villages, and now had reached us, as my mother said, straight from the darkness of the valley of the shadow of death. And once she would correct herself, they come from a place where men behave like wolves to each other, even refugees, even children. In my mind, I would associate the remote villages and the horrifying images of wolf men and darkness of the valley with the shadow of death. I love the words darkness and valley because they immediately conjured up a valley shrouded in darkness, with monasteries and cellars. I love the shadow of death because I didn't understand it. If I whispered shadow of death, I could almost hear a kind of deep, ghostly sound, like the note that comes from the lowest key on the piano, a sound that draws after it a trail of dim echoes, as though a disaster has happened and now there is no going back. I returned to the kitchen. I had read the paper that we were living in a fateful period and therefore we must engage all moral resources. And it also said that the actions of the British were casting a deep shadow and that the Hebrew nation was called upon to withstand the test. I left the house, looking at all around me as in the movies to make sure no one was watching me. A strange man in sunglasses, for example, might be concealed behind a newspaper, lurking in the doorway of one of the buildings on the other side of the road. But the street seemed absorbed in its own preoccupations. The green grocer was building a wall of empty crates. The boy who worked at the Sonosby grocery store was dragging a squeaking handcart. Childless old Pani Ostrowski was sweeping away at the walk in front of her door, probably for the third time that morning. Dr. Griffius was sitting on her balcony filling out filling cards. She was a spinster, and father was helping her to gather material for her memoirs of Jewish life in her native town of Rosenheim in Bavaria. And the kerosene seller went by slowly in his cart, the reins lying back on his knees, ringing handbell and singing in plaintive Yiddish song to his horse. I stood there and scrutinized intently the black words, Profe Boged Schaffel, Profi is a low-down trader, in case there was some tiny detail that could shed a new light. From haste or fear, the last letter of the word Boged, trader, had turned more like an R than a D, making me not a low-down trader, Boged, but a low-down adult, Boger. The morning I would gladly have given everything to be an adult.